Well, good morning. Welcome to lesson 71. Only God's plan for salvation will work. Thank goodness. You may not realize that the ego has set up a plan for salvation in opposition to God's. It is this plan in which you believe. Whether you think you don't believe in that or not, you actually do believe in it. Remember, the old program is in the background running away, and it's just going over and over and over. And through our spiritual determination, we go into that dark place with the Holy Spirit for the purpose of the healing of our minds, right? Which is what salvation accomplishes. It is this plan in which you believe. Since it is the opposite of God's, you also believe that to accept God's plan in place of the ego's is to be damned. This sounds preposterous, of course, yet after we have considered just what the ego's plan is, perhaps you will realize that, however preposterous it may be, you do believe it. You do believe it. The ego's plan for salvation centers around holding grievances. It maintains that if someone else spoke or acted differently, if some external circumstance or event were changed, you would be saved. Thus, the source of salvation is constantly perceived as outside yourself. Each grievance you hold is a declaration and an assertion in which you believe that says, if this were different, I would be saved. The change of mind that is necessary for salvation is thus demanded of everyone and everything except yourself. The role assigned to your own mind in this plan, then, is simply to determine what other than itself must change if you are to be saved. According to this insane plan, any perceived source of salvation is acceptable, provided that it will not work. This ensures that the fruitless search will continue. For the illusion that although this hope has failed, there is still grounds for hope in other places and in other things persists. Another person will yet serve better. Another situation will yet offer success. Such is the ego's plan for your salvation. Surely you can see how it is in strict accord with the ego's basic doctrine: seek but do not find. For what could more surely guarantee that you will not find salvation than to channelize all your efforts in searching for it where it is not? God's plan for salvation works simply because by following his direction, you seek for salvation where it is. But if you are to succeed as God promises you will, you must be willing to seek there only. Otherwise, your purpose is divided and you will attempt to follow two plans for salvation which are diametrically opposed in all ways. So the idea that something in the world can bring me happiness or something in the world can justify my holiness, or it can't. The world can't tell you who you are. There's nothing. Remember in the early 60s lessons that we said everything that the eyes perceive, the body's eyes perceive, is a form of temptation? It's like nothing outside of yourself can help you in this. It's purely internal. Salvation is within you. Okay, the kingdom of heaven lies within. The result can only bring confusion, misery, and a deep sense of failure and despair. All right, so trying to follow two plans which are diametrically opposed in all ways, you cannot serve two masters. Okay, you'll either love the one and hate the other, blah, blah, blah. Biblical. All right, it's one or the other. Salvation is not a compromise. Okay. How can you escape all of this? Very simply. The idea for today is the answer. Only God's plan for salvation will work. There can be no real conflict about this because there is no possible alternative to God's plan that will save you. His is the only plan that is certain in its outcome. His is the only plan that must succeed. Let us practice recognizing this certainty today. And let us rejoice that there is an answer to what seems to be a conflict with no resolution possible. All things are possible to God. Salvation must be yours because of his plan, which cannot fail. Begin the 2 longer practice periods for today by thinking about today's idea and realizing that it contains two parts, each making equal contribution to the whole. God's plan for your salvation will work and other plans will not. Do not allow yourself to become depressed or angry at the second part. It is inherent in the first. And in the first is your full release from all your own insane attempts and mad proposals to free yourself. They have led to depression and anger, but God's plan will succeed. It will lead to release and joy. Remembering this, let us devote the remainder of the extended practice periods to God to reveal his plan to us. Ask him very specifically, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say, and to whom? Give him full charge of the rest of the practice period and let him tell you what needs to be done by you in his plan for your salvation. He will answer. This is really cool. Ready? Listen to this. He will answer in proportion to your willingness to hear his voice. He will answer in proportion to your willingness to hear his voice. All right, so it's the integrity of the prayer of the heart, right, that allows you to be able to hear God's answer. If your prayers are just lip service, you're going to perceive some kind of maybe out of sequence time interval throughout the day or whatever it is whenever that answer comes to you, but you're not going to perceive the answer. Right? There has to be this longing, this kind of heartfelt, and you can't fake it. It's like it's got to come from this place like, I really want to know. Right? There has to be a willingness to allow for that answer and no other answer. Refuse not to hear. The very fact that you are doing the exercises proves that you have some willingness to listen. This is enough to establish your claim to God's answer. In the shorter practice periods, tell yourself often that God's plan for salvation and only his will work. Be alert to all temptation to hold grievances today and respond to them with this form of today's idea. Holding grievances is the opposite of God's plan for salvation and only his plan will work. Try to remember the idea for today some 6 or 7 times an hour. There could be no better way to spend half a minute or less than to remember the source of your salvation and to see it where it is. That's simple, isn't it? Thank you. All right, see you in the next one, which will be lesson 72. Holding grievances is an attack on God's plan for salvation.